Dear learners, welcome to the session, chapter 2, Management is Studied, and today the historical development of management approaches. This is the tutorial of part 2 from chapter 2. First of all, we will see the content we are going to discuss in this chapter. In part 1, we had discussed about early management, like historical development, classical approach, like scientific management and general administrative theory. In this session, we are going to discuss about part 2, behavioral approach. Under this approach, we will discuss the Hawthorne studies, quantitative approach. Under this approach, we will discuss about total quality management, and finally contemporary approach. Under this approach, we will discuss two major contribution from system approach and the contingency approach. So behavioral approach have covered the duration between 1700 to 1950. Major contribution have divided into two sections. In section 1, you will learn about early advocates contribution, and in the next you will learn about Hawthorne contribution. There are some features of behavioral approach. Generally, it is focused on the people's behavioral pattern in management, how people do behave in the organization. It emphasizes on how people behave in the organization. And managers shall think about motivating, leading, building trust, working team management, and managing conflict. So that all are the major features you will see under the behavioral approach. So how and who are contributed under these approaches? Here 4 writers name is given here: Robert Owen, Hugo Munsterberg, Mary Parker Follett, and Chester Barnard. They are the major contributor in this part, and all the authors mostly discussed on organizational behavior. This is the study of the actions of people at work. People are the most important asset of an organization. So all the early advocates or the authors try to emphasize or try to explain how people do behave in the organizations, why they do so, and what is the impact of that behavior on organizational performance. Here is the summary of early advocate contribution. At first, Robert Owen concentrated about workplace environment. He said money investment helps in improving working conditions. It means that if organizations emphasize on incentive through money, it will work. At the next, Hugo Munsterberg in 1900s focused on worker psychology. It means that worker psychology is different and it is important for the organization. At the same time, 1900s, Mary Parker differentiate between individuals and group behavior. It means that people, when you work individually and when you work in a team, in both the case, his behavioral pattern is not same, is different. Finally, Chester Barnard in 1930 introduced that organization is a social system. It means there are some social elements exist within the organization. So this is the summary of the major contributor that contributed under this category. Now we will discuss about one particular behavioral approach, and it is from the Hawthorne studies. Without question, the most important contribution to the organizational behavior field came out of the Hawthorne studies. This is a series of productivity studies conducted at the Western Electric Company situated in the USA. And the author get some experimental findings that is presented here. According to his findings, it is found that productivity unexpectedly increased under imposed adverse working conditions. The author did some experiment under some working conditions. By controlling the light, how people's productivity changes. But he got some unexpected findings. Whatever the light, whatever the illumination, people are just considering that they are monitored for these reasons. Whatever the situation, in every case, they try to show their performance. Even the light is getting worse, their performance is getting better. So there is the connection was not established here. And also he found that the effect of incentive plan was less than expected. It means that as long as people know that they are monitored, incentive system also not working as like whatever it is expected. And the researchers concluded that social norms, group standards, and attitudes are more strongly influence individual output and worker behavior than do monetary incentive. So this is all about Hawthorne studies. Now we will see or we will discuss about the quantitative approach. Quantitative approach came out between 1940 to 1950. This approach mostly focused on total quality management. Quantitative approach, also called operations research or management science. This approach evolved from mathematical and statistical methods developed to solve Second World War military logistics and quality control problems. It mostly focused on improving managerial decision making by applying statistics, optimization model, information model, and computer simulation. So this is the basic introduction about the quantitative approach, and this approach started to apply by the military in the Second World War, and they applied so many mathematical tools to take the decision under these approaches. Total quality management, this is the significant contribution of the quantitative approach. And total quality management devoted to continuous improvement and responding customer needs and expectations. So total quality management try to excel the performance in all dimensions of the product and services. It has some basic features. First one, intense focus on the customer. It means who buy the product or services and serve others in the organizations that are important. So customer satisfaction is very important. Concern for continual improvement. Continual improvement means whatever the current stage, it might be the very good, but what next? It is said that very good is not even enough. Good. So quality can always be improved. So whatever the current situation, it should be improved in the next stage. Process focused. It means that focuses on work process for continuous improvement. Then improvement in the quality of everything organization does. It means that caring about final product deliveries and response to complaints. Next one, accurate measurement using statistical technique, compared against standards, trace the problem and eliminate their causes. By doing this, organizations can improve their product and services continuously. Finally, empowerment of the employees for finding and solving the problem. So these are the five basic features of total quality management. So how today's manager be able to apply the learnings from the quantitative approach? The quantitative approach contributes directly to management decision making in the areas of planning and controlling. For instance, when managers make budgeting, queuing, scheduling, quality control, and similar decisions, they typically rely on quantitative techniques. Like they can apply different types of statistical tools, mathematical calculation for getting all these results. Finally, specialized software has made to the use of these techniques that less intimidating for managers, although many still feel anxious about using them. It means that by applying quantitative approach, many software later on came to the organizational field that help the manager to increase their efficiency, although some managers are feeling anxious about using them. Now it's time to discuss about contemporary approach. Most of these earlier approaches focused on inside the organizations. Starting the 1960s, management researchers began to look at what was happening in the external environment outside the boundaries of the organizations. It means that before this contemporary approach, almost all the approaches mostly focus the internal practices of the organizations, but there is an impact of external environment also. Under this category, how the external factors affect the internal practices is shown here. Two contemporary management practices or perspective like system and contingency are part of this approach. Here in the next, we will see more about these two theories. The system approach. System is a set of interrelated and interdependent parts arranged in a manner that produces a unified whole. That means system have some interrelated activities which use some materials and finally produce a unique product or services. There are two types of system. One is closed system, other one is open system. Closed system are the system that are not influenced by the environment. What about the external factors? It never considered this. Another system is called open system, and the system dynamically interact to their environment by taking inputs. It means that if the environment is changes, the process, the output, both or might be one or single one changed. Here is the diagram for the learners to understand about the system and how system works. Every system consists of three parts like input, process and output. In the input section, raw materials like human resource, capital, technology is addressed here, and these materials is processed to the finished product by under some activities or process like employees work activities, management activities, technology and operations methods. By applying all these tools and techniques, the raw materials are converted into outputs, and the outputs we get here in the form of product and service, financial results, information, human results, and so on. The most important fact of this system theory is that the system interact with the internal environment as well as the external environment. Whatever it is, if the elements of internal environment and the external environment changes, the system started to work differently. This is the main or important findings of this theory. So how could we implement the system approach in our managerial practices? Coordination among all parts of system is essential for proper functioning of the organizations. As we have seen that there is 3 parts and we have to coordinate all 3 parts. And decisions in one area will have an effect in the other areas of the organizations. It means if the input changes, definitely output will be changes. If the elements of internal environment and external environment changes, definitely the process and output will be changes. Organizations are not self-contained and therefore must adapt the changes in their external environment. This is very simple, as we said that if the environment changes, the organization shall adapt the changes with their daily practices. So that's the implication from the system approach. Now it's time to discuss about the contingency approach, final concept of this chapter. This approach, also sometimes called as the situational approach, there is no one universally applicable set of management principles or rules by which managers can manage the organization. It means different organizations could apply different management system under different environmental situation. Organizations are individually different and face different situation and also require different way of managing. It means every organizations have separate entities, separate activities, separate goals, separate objectives, and the separate way of getting there or gaining their objectives. There are some particular variables of contingency approaches. 4 variables are here: organizational science, routineness of task technology, environmental certainty, and individual differences. And under these 4 category, we will see the different situation in the organization. Some organizations are large, some are small. For larger organizations, bureaucratic structure is very or highly beneficial, as we studied before. But for the small organizations, sometimes bureaucracy is dangerous because it reduces the efficiency. Large organizations requires more routine job and technology rather than small dynamic organizations. Small dynamic organizations don't require sometimes a routine job. Environment is dynamic. It means changes in nature. Under a dynamic environmental situation, contingency approach is required. People work in the organization is different from one another. Different behavioral pattern require different management practices. So these are the all 4 variables that was discussed under the contingency approaches. Now these are the 21 different specific keywords or terms that will help the learners to understand this chapter well. If our learners emphasize on this key point, it will helpful to understand the discussion. So this is the summary of our whole discussion, part 1 and part 2. By these 2 tutorials, we have completed our discussion on early management, classical approach, general administrative theory, behavioral approach, quantitative approach, and contemporary approach. So that's all our discussion on chapter 2. We hope that our learners will get their expected clarification about the different approaches that was addressed in chapter 2. So that's all for today. Thank you for your attention and joining.